Welcome. I'm Stephanie Jordan. I'm the local food program manager at Sustainable Solano. So I'm glad to have all of you guys on our Basics of Beans class. This is one of many classes that we're doing for at least this year through June for sure. And we're actually working on getting more funding to go beyond that. So it's one of many classes that we're doing to kind of raise awareness of a lot of the crops grown by our local farmers here in Solano County, California. And we're focusing a lot on plant-based recipes that highlight all of the delicious and healthy fruit, vegetables, nuts, herbs that are grown around here in our region. Speaking of our region, we do talk a lot about some different areas of Solano County that our farmers are at. I would like to give a brief land acknowledgement. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison briefly. She's going to share something in the chat and fill you in a little bit about that before I get going on the cooking.
Sounds great. Thanks, Steph. For the land acknowledgement, we just want to acknowledge that we're meeting in the unceded territory of California, which is home to nearly 200 tribal nations. We want to honor the original inhabitants and their dedication to active land stewardship and protection that resulted in a relationship that benefited both people and the land for generations. And I will share a link in the chat for the native land map so you can look and see which lands you may be living on.
Thank you, Allison. Yes, it's interesting. A lot of times we have people joining us on these classes from all over the country. Sometimes all over the world, which is fascinating to me. So feel free to check it out and learn about your own land that you're on. So, all right, this is our kind of bean basics. And so I decided to do this class for a couple reasons. One is, it's winter time. The fresh produce is a little bit tricky right now between February and March. The farmers are kind of working with this in-between season, and beans are almost always in season. And also there were some comments in some previous surveys that said that some of you wanted to learn more about beans. So here we are. And I'm going to do a couple different recipes. One is to kind of walk you through doing a bean recipe from scratch. And then for the other one, we're just going to use some canned beans, but you could use a scratch cooked bean as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is put together my mixture for the black bean burgers using the canned beans, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some soaking techniques and how you can prepare the dried beans from scratch. So, all right. And first of all, we have the canned black beans. I'm using just some basic, grocery store. This is S&W organic black beans. And what I did is I had 2 cans that I opened and drained and spread out on paper towels to try and dry them out. So here they are. And I just kind of went over them a little bit with some extra paper towel. The goal is to get these as dry as you can before we put them together in the mixture, okay? So those are just gonna sit over here while I prep the other ingredients. All right. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to kind of make a little bit of a paste with some flour and some eggs, and that's going to help bind this together. You can definitely use gluten-free flour, I would say, for this. So if you want to substitute, feel free to do so. I'm going to do this over here at the sink because I don't want to get raw egg all over my setup over there. So I'm just going to crack a couple of eggs into this bowl. Let me wash my hands. Okay, so 2 eggs and 2 tablespoons of flour, just the regular all-purpose flour, or like I said, you can also use a good gluten-free flour. So we don't have to be like, super exact here. This is not, rocket science. There's our flour. And I'm going to whisk that together just to make a little base here. I want to check on the sound. Can you guys hear me okay? I usually have my earbuds in, but I have a new laptop and I had to pair it up and there just wasn't time to deal with that. So let me know. Okay, we're gonna let that sit there. And then the next thing we're gonna do is add some of our aromatics and some vegetables. So I have some scallions here, which are green onions. The spring onions will be coming up soon, and you could definitely substitute some of those in. So I'm just gonna take 4 of these, and I'm gonna trim the roots. I need to get my favorite little kitchen tool, which is a compost. Get my little bucket over here. Okay, and the ends, the tops of these look pretty good. Sometimes they look a little, wilty. So I'm just gonna give those just a quick trim, and then we'll just mince these up. Something else that would work if you don't have green onions is to use chives. That would work equally well. So chives, spring onions, the scallions, any of those would work great. You could even do a combination of like a regular white or yellow onion in combination with some chives, and you kind of get a similar effect. If any of you grow garlic chives, those would also be really yummy. If you're a garlic lover, you could substitute in some of those. So I'm going to get this fairly small, but it's really up to you and your preference. If you like, a more chunky burger, you can leave a few larger chunks. All right, and these go into the bowl with the egg mixture. The cilantro is next. So I was kind of in the process of washing my cilantro. This was from my CSA box. So it's here in this big bowl of water, soaking away just for a few minutes, and I'm gonna spin it now. So I'm just gonna stick it in my sink. Got too many things here. Let me shift this over here. So I like to use my salad spinner for this. So here's my salad spinner. So I'm just gonna take a handful of these out, put them in here, and we'll give this a nice spin there. And what I like to do with herbs is after they've kind of spun around, I like to lay them out on a towel for a little bit, just to kind of let them air dry a tad. Right. And I'm not going to go crazy with picking the leaves off here. I only need about 3 or 4 tablespoons of the cilantro. There's a lot of flavor that goes into the stems, and I don't really want to waste the stems either. So I'm just going to take a little handful and give it a little chop chop. So again, 3 or 4 tablespoons of chopped cilantro, or minced rather. We want to get this fairly small too. So 4 tablespoons is a 1/4 cup. And, oh, I pulled them out already. Let's see where I'm at here with what I. And in terms of storing cilantro, I know I've talked about this in other classes, but it works best if you take your cilantro bunch and put it into a glass of water as if it's like cut flowers. Put a plastic bag loosely around it, and then put the whole thing into the fridge, and it'll stay nice and fresh for at least a week. Depends on how fresh it is from the store or the farm, of course. Tends to be better from the farm. So here's my cilantro. I'm gonna put that in with my egg mixture. All right, then we need to do a little bit of garlic. A couple garlic cloves or more, depending on how much you like garlic. I love garlic, so the more the merrier, I say. We're going to be working with garlic in both of these recipes and in different ways. So for this one, we're going to mince them up. Let's see, I've got, that's at least, we'll do 3. Give it a whack, cut off the root end, and then this will pop out. Garlic can be a little sticky and hard to deal with sometimes. So Don't worry if it starts to stick all over, you just kind of have to wipe everything down. Okay, there's that. Some root spots there. Mince this up. And that's really about all of the fresh ingredients that are going in here. The rest is going to be some dried spices and also a little bit of hot sauce. And again, you know, that's something that you can adjust according to taste. Out there, my garlic. Okay, there's my minced garlic. In we go. Into the bowl. All right. So it's not going to work so well to use the whisk anymore because I've got, you know, these greens and things in here. So I'm just going to set this over here. We'll move to a spoon shortly. Wrap up my cilantro. All right. Okay, next we have some cumin, hot sauce, and coriander, and salt and pepper. So yes, we want a teaspoon of cumin. And this is just, you know, basic dried cumin. I've also seen roasted or toasted cumin at the grocery store, which will give you a little bit deeper flavor. So if you see that available, try it out. It's always kind of nice. And then we have some coriander, a half of a teaspoon of that. And then some salt and pepper. I'm just going to kind of eyeball this, put in a good hefty pinch of salt, and I don't even have my pepper out. Let's see here. We'll do some, we want to do at least 1/4 of a teaspoon of pepper in there. Okay, so let me grab a spoon and we'll give this a mix. Okay. All right, so that's what it looks like, kind of this pasty concoction here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a food processor some tortilla chips. I have some blue corn tortilla chips here, and also my beans. I have my base, I don't have the top, so hold on. What must I do? All right, here we are. If anyone is in the market for a scale, I really have liked this one that I've gotten, I don't know, 25 years ago or something. It's a Salter, and it has a tempered glass top, so it's held up really well. And only like this past week have the batteries gone dead after, you know, a gazillion years. It has measurements in both like ounces and grams, so it's been a nice little scale. So highly recommended. So I'm going to put the chips in the processor and just give them a little whisk or a whirl rather. It's right here until they're finely ground. Okay, a little more. Hold on. All right, then to this, we're going to add our black beans and just give it a few little quick pulses just to kind of break it down. We don't want it to turn to mush, you know, we don't want it to be like a hummus, but we do want to kind of break up the beans a little bit. So I'm going to add those. This will take me a minute to get all these out of here, off of the paper towel. So as I'm sure a lot of you know, beans are a great source of protein. They're high in fiber. Black beans especially go really well with a lot of these Mexican flavors that we're using. You could probably substitute or do a mixture of like pinto and black beans. I think this would be, you know, a pretty friendly recipe toward other varieties. Okay, there, just about got them in there. There we go. All right, so just a few little pulses, like maybe like 5 or 6 quick ones. And what I'm looking for is like, you know, kind of like roughly broken down. I want to start to see the white that's inside the bean, but I, you know, again, I don't want to totally like puree them apart. All right, let me see if I can kind of hold this up. So you can see that there's still some that might be whole. Down at the bottom where my blade has a little more traction, there's a little, it's blended up a little bit more. Let me see here. Spatula. I'm going to just try to dig down there a little bit so we can show you. Yeah, so down here, it's pureed down a little bit more. So it's definitely finer ground. The beans are ground down a little bit more toward the bottom here. So it'll all kind of even itself out. All right, so now my bean mixture is going to go in with my egg mixture here and the herbs. And what you can do is there's a little hole here underneath, so you can just kind of put your finger in there and hold your blade so that your blade doesn't come popping out. That way you're not trying to sift your blade out and dropping stuff all over. So that's kind of how you get stuff out of the food processor. All right. So now what this mixture needs to do is sit in the refrigerator for at least an hour, up to 24 hours. So this is kind of the do ahead part of this recipe. You can do this on Monday and then make your black bean burgers on Tuesday. So I'm going to we're going to walk through like various stages of kind of how you can work with this recipe and time it out so that it's kind of, you know, an easy weeknight meal for you. So there's my mixture. So I blend, I want to make sure all that garlic and the herbs get blended in with the beans. And then the reason we need to let it sit is, you know, we have the flour in there, so we want to have the gluten kind of start to develop and activate, and that's going to help it to hold together. It's going to absorb that moisture so that they actually do stay together when we go to form them. Okay. All right. Let's leave the spoon in there. Okay, so I'm going to just cover this up and throw it in the fridge. Obviously, we won't have, it won't be sitting for an entire hour, but we'll give it a little time and then I'll kind of walk through the portioning of it toward the end of the class. Random stuff in that fridge there. Okay. Clean up a little here. Like this. Alrighty. So now, let me talk a little bit about the cannellini beans. Okay. So for the cannellinis, I must say, I could not find cannellinis at a store. So I ended up using these Great Northern beans. However, then I saw there were cannellini beans on Amazon. So they tend to kind of go in and out, I've noticed. Like sometimes they're around and readily available and other times they're not. So especially if they're coming from Italy. So the Great Northerns, I did a pre-soak, which I started last night. So here's kind of your general rule for the beans. All you have to do is kind of remember the number 8, which actually, if you put 2 beans together, it kind of makes like the number 8, right? A little top and a little bottom. So you wanna, if you're gonna do the pre-soak with a day in advance, you put your so we're working with 1 pound of beans. So we have 1 pound of beans in the bowl. You add generally 8 cups of water. So that's your first number 8. 8 cups of water in here. And put it on the counter and just let it sit overnight or for at least 8 hours, okay? 8 cups of water, 8-hour soak, and then this is ready to go. So what I did before I put the beans in here though, is I did put them in my colander yesterday and I ran some cold water and I mixed them around just to make sure that, you know, any dust or dirt got washed off. You know, it's not, the machines they use are pretty good, but sometimes you do find little tiny stones or little grit or whatever. So you just want to make sure that you do rinse them before, you know, I tend to rinse them first and I put them in my bowl here for soaking. Okay. If you don't have a way to measure, it's roughly at least 2 inches of water above the beans when you first put them into the bowl, and then you let it soak overnight. All right, so there's those. Move this bowl aside. Okay, so now I'm just gonna get the other things ready for my cannellini bean recipe. We'll just let those sit there for a minute. So for this one, we're going to use garlic again. I'm going to use an entire head or 2. These are small heads, so I'm going to use both of these. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrub the root off a little bit as best I can on both of these. I kind of like to clean things up as much as possible. You can also try to cut the root off. If you've got a particularly dirty root base on your garlic, you can kind of try to trim it, but I have to tell you, these roots are very strong and they don't always shave off super easy, but feel free to try. It does help to kind of wet it like I just did. So I'm gonna use both of these. So I'm gonna just trim this one up a little bit. You could also go over it with a very stiff vegetable brush. That would work too. Okay. All right, get my roots out of there. And then I'm gonna cut off about the top third or so, so that I have all of my cloves inside exposed. Okay, so I just kind of chop the top off. Now this, you know, you can keep this. This is just little bits of garlic here on the top part. So you can chop that up and use it for something else, or, you know, if they're big enough, you could also throw them into the pot. So your choice. These I think they might kind of just get lost, or, you know, they might just dissolve. I mean, I'm going to get rid of this. I had the kind of a long top with the little papery stuff, but these tops of the cloves, we can just throw those in. All right, same with this side, this head of garlic. I'm gonna trim off that. I have my cloves exposed. The other thing going in here is sage. So here's a nice big sprig of fresh sage that we're going to use. This goes really well with the navy beans and the cannellinis and even those little white, they're just called like small white beans. They tend to go really well with sage. They go great with rosemary. You know, even a parsley or a pesto is excellent with these white beans. You know, they've got kind of a milder flavor than things like the kidney beans and the black beans. So, you know, you can use kind of these lighter, more kind of aromatic herbs. We're not going to go for like, you know, heavy spices or, you know, like the cumin and the coriander like we did with the black beans. So they're a little lighter. All right, so I have my sage. Let's keep all my stuff right here. I will do a little drizzle of olive oil into the pot too. Okay, and also the last thing I'm going to throw in there are some peppercorns, just a pinch of them. You do want to sift these out at the end. So if you want to put these in like a little tiny bit of cheesecloth or something, you can do that. It'll make it easier to fish them out. In my case, I'm just going to throw them in and deal with it later, which is usually what I do. So I think we're ready to kind of put it all together in the pot, and then we'll just let it start cooking. Oh, one other thing. These white beans also go excellent with some kind of a ham. So I do have a ham hock here. This actually came from a different farm. So I trimmed up the fat. It was pretty heavy on the fat layer around the outside. So I just trimmed that up. This will just start to cook down. And then when your beans are all done, you can just kind of shred apart all of this meat and add it back into your beans. It's kind of like a peasant dish in my opinion, but it's really yummy and goes really well with our flavors. So that's gonna add that in too. All right, let me wash my hands again. And I'm gonna put all of this in a Dutch oven. I have one of these big Le Creuset type pots, a nice heavy heavy bottomed pan is what you want. This is going to be cooking for probably an hour or so. So you want to have something that holds heat, isn't, will kind of transfer heat gradually. So that's helpful with these pots. Okay, so I'm going to drain my white beans, which are here. I'm going to give them one more little rinse. All right. I've made this many times. I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything here. Yes, okay. So the beans are going into here. And you'll notice that after they soak, they've at least doubled in size. So they are bigger. All right, here comes our number 8 again. I have my new water, which is about room temperature. So I have 8 cups of water going into the pot now. So 8 cups to soak, 8 hours in length to soak, and then 8 cups of water going in to cook. All right, now I'm going to add my garlic heads, which are these right there. I'm going to add my sage sprig, a few peppercorns. All right, and a little drizzle of olive oil just to kind of add a little flavor. And this is excellent after it's done to add a little more drizzle of olive oil on the top of it. All right, and then I'm going to also add in my ham hock. Over there, so I'm just going to move all of this, and this basically just all goes onto the stove. So here we are, everything's just in here. Okay, and I'm going to partially cover it. And then we're going to wait for that to come to a boil. And once it starts to boil, then I'm going to turn it down to a simmer, and then I want to kind of start to skim. There's a lot of foam that sometimes will kind of bubble up. Part of that might be from my ham hock, part of it is also from the beans. And you just want to skim that off as it arises. It just has some miscellaneous impurities in it. And so we'll take that off. And then if you need to add more water, feel free. The other thing you could do is also cook this in a vegetable stock. You don't have to use just water. You can definitely use a stock. It will add a little more flavor. And, again, you can switch out some of the herbs. We could put a sprig of rosemary in there. Basil's a little too tender. I would wait and do basil fresh, maybe on top after it's done, or like I mentioned earlier, mix it into like a pesto and then serve that on top of the white beans when it's all done. So this is largely, a hands-off kind of thing. So this is something where if I'm making a dinner tonight, maybe I'll get that going first. I know it's going to have to cook for about an hour. And then maybe I'm going to do like some salad or, get some greens ready to go with it. You can be doing that while the beans are cooking. And then when this is done, we're not draining it. We're just going to eat it straight with all of the liquid that's in the pot with the beans. Okay. So, I believe everything is in there. Yeah. Oh, the salt and the acid. Okay. So important. Salt, you can add anytime you want to beans. It will help the flavor immensely. I'm going to let this come to a boil first and let it cook for maybe half an hour. And then I'll add, a teaspoon or so of salt, maybe even more. The thing that you do not want to add to beans is an acid, like a vinegar or even tomatoes can make this happen. So the issue is that once your acid goes in there while your beans are cooking, your beans won't cook very well anymore. They kind of like firm up and you won't have soft beans. So salt is good, acid, not so good. You can mix in an acid at the tail end. If I'm making a black bean soup, I've got kind of this similar lineup of stuff with the garlic and the onions and the spices and stuff. Maybe I want to add a little lime juice. That'd be kind of tasty. I'm going to do that right at the end after everything is all done. So, okay, so that's going to do its thing. How are we doing on time? Oh, pretty good. All right, so let's go back really quick to our black bean burgers. I know they haven't really spent all of their time in the fridge, but I just want to kind of walk you through your options for what you can do with them once that mixture is done. So I'm just going to clear a little space here. All right, let's see. This plastic wrap ready. That and then so these things, you know, traditionally we'd think it's an ice cream scoop. It's actually called a portion scoop, and they come in different sizes. And this would be really handy for portioning out your burger mixture. For one thing, you can really get it packed in there really nice and tight, which is what you want to do with this particular mixture. So let me move this thing back over here. And I'm going to put on some gloves because it's going to be kind of sticky. It kind of helps you to handle it a little bit better. So once your bean batter is done chilling, then what you can do is you can make these patties and then put them in the freezer. And then you've got them anytime during the week. So you want to use a little bit of plastic wrap for this. But in lieu of a Ziploc bag, I did kind of want to just show you this kind of a thing. It's like a silicone reusable bag with this little slidey thing that goes on the top. Not sure what the technical name is for this, but so, you know, once you get your bag loaded up, this just slides on top, and then this whole thing goes in the freezer, and then you can just wash it and reuse it. So I'm trying to see what, doesn't seem to be any kind of brand on here, but I think if you just, you know, look up reusable freezer bags or something, that'll get you there. So this particular recipe is going to make at least 6 burgers. So I'm just want to pat that in there, and then it will release here. And we want to flatten it out into the shape that you want. You know, we're going, I think my scooper is a little bit smaller than what normally I would do. I might add a little extra to this. Just pack it, make sure it's packed together here. There, that looks a little better. Give that a little more love. Okay, so then once I have my patty made, we'll just wrap it up to kind of seal it. And this again is if you're freezing them, okay? I'll try to get some air out. Okay, and then into the bag we go. On the floor, that's all right. Okay, so then we'll just lay them in here and then put them in the freezer. Then, let's say it's now 3 days from now, I wanna cook up my burger. They do work best if you thaw them out. So pull them out of the freezer in the morning, let them thaw in your fridge during the day, and then you're ready to just sear them in a pan for dinner. So the other option is if I'm not gonna freeze these, then you'll just make the patties and you can lay them out on a sheet pan, and then we're gonna just sear them in a saute pan. So, you know, I could try that now. I don't know if it's going to work out so well because this really is best if it sits, but I thought maybe instead of searing, because I think we all know how to just fry something in a pan, I would talk a little bit about some different pan options. So these are non-stick pans, but they're by a company called ScanPan. And I just recently, found out about them maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. They're supposedly like much more durable, and they're a little more green. They should not be emitting all of that, you know, horrible stuff like the old Teflon pans did. So far I've been pretty happy with them. They have a really heavy bottom, so they take a while to heat up. So they're definitely not thin. So anyway, if anybody else has had experience with them, please, you know, let me know, chime in. This one is the same pan, but it has a slightly different bottom to it. And this one does work on induction. So they can be, you know, gas, electric, or induction on some of them. I've tried the griddle one, and for some reason this one doesn't do induction, but this one does. So I don't know. Anyhow, I just thought I would mention that if anybody's in the market for a new non-stick pan. I'm checking on my beans over here. Nope, they're not quite there yet. Okay, so I think that's kind of all I wanted to do with the bean routine here. And the oil that I would use for the beans when I would sear it, I personally like to use avocado oil. You could also just use a very neutral other kind of oil, you know, a canola or a grapeseed or something like that. So I would save your olive oil for something more Italian, or, you know, because olive oil has some rich flavors to it. So I would keep it neutral. That way your garlic and spices really come out in the black bean mixture. So, all right, it's a little shorter class ended up. And this back here is just going to cook for like an hour. I'll just kind of stir it once in a while. Allison, I'm seeing random things in the chat. So are there questions?
There are quite a few questions. So real quick, I am going to share the link for our survey in the chat so that we can hopefully get some feedback and get some good ideas for future classes.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, we have a quick survey. It's maybe like 5 questions. And if you've been with us before, you know it well, but it helps us for, you know, our reporting and all of that. So even if you've done it before, please do it again. Do that survey. Thank you.
And then a couple of questions directly related to the recipes, as well as a couple that are more being general. But for the burgers, there was a question on what non-gluten alternative you would recommend for the flour that would work for those.
Okay, so, you know, you could just try to find a gluten-free flour. I have used Bob's Red Mill gluten-free flour before in similar applications, and that seemed to work really well. The other thing that you could do, let me think. I mean, this is a fairly kind of pasty mixture. You could probably also just kind of up your, oh, you know what I think might work is take a just a regular corn tortilla, like a soft, flexible one, maybe soak it in a little water and then kind of spin that around in your process, or chop it up, or, you know, break it down somehow, and just let that sit in here too with it, because you're just kind of trying to create a little more mass and something for that egg to grab onto. So I think either one of those options might work. You know, you could also experiment with just more, a few more tortilla chips, you know, and kind of ground down. So yeah, that'd be my thought.
Great. So that would then make them a gluten-free option.
Then they'd be gluten-free, yeah, because the only gluten in here is the 2 tablespoons of flour. So I think, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I had thought about the eggs, but no, I don't think this would work. Never mind. Yeah.
And then any tips or advice for or against any additions to the black bean burgers, like adding in corn?
Say that again. Oh, additions to this? Like what could you add into it? Yeah, I think, you know, I feel like this is a pretty basic concoction to start with. So if you want to add like corn from, like, you know, like sweet corn, you could add a little bit of that. I think you could do some diced up carrots if it was really, or grated. I would do grated carrots or something that's really fine. If you want to try to sneak in some extra veggies. The cilantro, you know, you could also sneak in a little kale and just tell, if this were my children, I'd be like, yeah, well, that's just the cilantro, you know, it's green. Yeah. So, you know, but I think that something like a kale, I was going to say spinach, but spinach has water in it. And we're kind of trying to, you know, cut back a little bit on the water content here. So yeah, some really finely minced kale could get thrown in there. You know, again, any kind of aromatic, any kind of onion, garlic, chive type of thing would go great. I'm trying to think what other spices you could, oh, I forgot to do my hot sauce. You could also put in some peppers, like some jalapeno or some serrano minced up. That would work great. Yeah, let's see, what else?
We have a couple of suggestions in the chat, one being bell peppers, one being cooked brown rice.
Oh yeah, sure, you could do, oh yeah, rice would work for your gluten-free thing too. I don't know why I wasn't thinking of that. So yes.
And then there was a question on whether it'd be okay to use sunflower oil instead of avocado.
Sure, yeah, sunflower oil is nice and neutral too. Sure, that works great.
And And then on the white beans, there was a question about if you're not using the ham hock, would you add salt to the pot? I know you mentioned salting as well, but
Yeah, I'm gonna let them, so I've done this many times without the ham hock too. And so either way, I would wait and add the salt after about the first half an hour of cooking. You just want them to kind of get the water absorbed first, and then you can throw in your salt and they'll still absorb salt as you go. The other thing to watch for on the salt is as this cooks, you know, the water is going to be evaporating. And so if you put a ton of salt in at the beginning, your water content is going to go away, and then you're going to end up with like oversalted beans. So that's why I like to wait a little bit and just kind of add it in, and you can always add more at the end. You definitely want to add it, you know, once, you know, in that cooking process, because it will absorb and you'll have more flavor, but just don't overdo it right at the get-go. So.
Okay, and then for some more general bean questions, there was a question about how to prevent beans from breaking up while they're cooking. This person's saying that tends to happen all the time.
So I think you just need to watch them. Also, it may also depend on just how fresh your beans are to begin with, because they do, you know, they are dried and we all think, oh, they're going to last forever in my shelf, in my pantry, but they do start to get old. They do get a little wrinkly. Hold on, I hear this thing boiling over here. Good opportunity to show you the, hold on here. Just gonna set up an extra trivet thing here. Actually, I don't know if I'll really be able to show you. Oh, maybe I will. There is kind of my, I don't know if you can kind of see the little foamy, scummy stuff starting to happen here. So that's where I want to skim. And I just try to find like kind of a flat-ish large spoon, and you just kind of run it along the outside. I usually have a bowl kind of near the stove when I'm doing this, and just kind of take a little bit off. So this was definitely boiling. So I'm just gonna, actually while I'm here, I'll just get a little mix. Let's go. Make sure that all those herbs and yummy things shoved down there. Okay. All right, I'll be back. Okay, so that's like kind of the lid's cracked open a little bit. Okay, so we were talking about how to keep them from breaking down. So what I don't want to do is have this at like a rolling boil the whole time it's cooking. So that's part of probably the issue too, is that maybe it's cooking too robustly in the pan. So you want to just kind of have it at a gentle simmer. That'll help keep your beans together a little bit. And then part of it might just be the age of the beans, like I was mentioning before. Yeah, that's kind of the only thing I can think of, really. But it does happen. I feel like, you know, when it does start to do that, I would say just kind of watch them and adjust your temperature. So that might be the best thing you can do.
Okay, and then specific to adzuki beans, do you need to soak them? They tried cooking some up without soaking. It took a long time to soften, and they split and they didn't taste good. Yeah,
I think that those require some soaking. It's been a while since I've worked with them, but I'm pretty sure those need a soak. Do like an overnight soak. If anybody else has recent experience, feel free to chime in. It's been a long time since I've dealt with adzuki beans, but I think they need a soak. Just about everything benefits from a soak except for lentils. Lentils cook really quickly. Actually, if you're interested in lentils, there was another cooking class I did all about lentils or something, and lentils cook in like 30 minutes. You can rinse them and throw them in the pot and you're done. You know, half an hour later, you've got some lentils ready to go. But every other bean, it really does benefit from some soaking. I can't think of anything that really doesn't. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you can find the lentil class on our YouTube channel, or if you go to the recipes page, it's at the bottom of the recipe. So. And we have some advice saying overnight soak for adzuki. And then, yeah, they'll cook in about 35 minutes after an overnight soak. So, there are actually a couple of questions, one asking if you recommend cooking beans in an Instant Pot, and one asking about using a pressure cooker to make bean recipes.
Yes, both of those things work great for beans. It cuts back on the cooking time tremendously. I personally do not have an Instapot. I've been asking for one. I have a birthday coming soon. So my sister uses an Instapot a lot. She does it more for soups and stews, but I'm pretty sure my neighbors down the street who come from Panama, they use their Instapot like all the time, and they do a lot of beans and rice. And so I bet that it's getting used for beans. I have done them in a pressure cooker at a different location when that was available, and that worked great. So whatever your instructions are with your pressure cooker, by all means, yes, definitely go for it. Yeah, I remember pressure cookers are great. I mean, I remember my mom had one, you know, I've kind of been thinking about that too, but you can definitely get those big chunks of meat cooked down really fast, things like beans. It'd be great to use that too. So report back, try it out.
And then a question about the actual consumption, if there are things that you can do during the preparation to prevent gas after eating the beans.
Right. During preparation, I don't think so. I think it's just, they are what they are. I have heard that cumin can cut back on that, you know, the actual spice. But I don't know if that's a scientific fact, but I've heard that that helps sometimes. I think some people are just more sensitive than others. Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I know there's products out there, but I haven't tried them. So I don't know. If anybody out there has thoughts on that, feel free to share.
Yeah, so looks like a suggestion coming in the chat. And then there's talk about epazote or epazote.
Oh, epazote. Yeah, that's an herb that comes from like the Latin cultures. Yeah, maybe it could.
And making sure to discard the soaking liquid should help with gas. And then Deanie, looks like you have a suggestion. I'm waiting to see it, but pops
There's
up.
a lot of action.
Possibly cooking with a piece of kombu seaweed in the cooking water helps. Also a little salt in the overnight soak water. And then Deanie says sprinkle a tablespoon or two of baking soda in the water.
Oh, okay, there's a lot of opinions out there on the. I have a feeling
lots of crowdsourcing of suggestions
has some solution for that. So copy. I don't know. You guys copy the chat and like try it out. Yeah,
that's great. So, and that is it for questions.
Okay. You know, there was one thing that I wanted to cover briefly, which is the quick soak idea. So for the quick soak, instead of doing the overnight thing, if you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh no, I forgot to soak my beans, you can bring the beans to a boil in your water and boil them for about 2 to 5 minutes, depending on how big they are, because some beans are really tiny. And then you just let them sit there. And you turn your oven off and let them sit for about an hour. And so then after that, you know, you're ready to then proceed with the rest of your recipe as if you've done the overnight soak. So, so that's kind of the quick soak method. You want to boil it, cook it briefly for like, you know, 2, 3, 5 minutes, depending, and then let it sit for an hour, and then you're good to go. So, all right. So that, any other questions? I'm seeing random things, but I can't, it's too far.
just a lot of thank yous. Okay. Yeah, and a question if the quick soak is just as good as the other method.
Yeah, I mean, I've had mixed experiences with the quick soak. I tend to like the overnight soak better. I think it kind of will help the beans cook more evenly. So ideally you do the overnight soak, but next best thing is the quick soak. So, All right, don't forget to do the survey. And the next class we have coming up, I'm working, if anybody was here last November and participated in a Thanksgiving sides class, I'm trying to get Laura Doyle back on a class in March. So we're working out the dates there. And then the beginning of April, I will be doing a zero waste cooking class in conjunction with somebody from Republic Services. We're going to talk about how to kind of, utilize the entire plant and do, we'll do a veggie stock and I think some pestos or something. So you'll learn a lot about a new food waste law coming up and how we can all work with it in our own kitchens. So, all right. Thank you so much, everybody.